All right, Shaun, I don't feel we talk enough about AI on this show. So, in fact, we don't talk enough about tech, to be perfectly honest, on this show sometimes, which is why we get so much trouble with Mr. F. But look, let's bring in two guests who know all about it. I think we can safely say these guys know their onions.
Yes, they do.
When it comes to AI. I think they do. We've got Joe Devon, the man who, one half of the founding team of the Global Accessibility Awareness Day event, the amazing event. I've been so pleased to talk to you in the past, Joe. It is amazing to meet you in person. Welcome to Double Tap in person.
Yeah, this is just like Double Tap, but in person. That's great. Yeah,
it's just like Double Tap, isn't it? It's almost just like it. Almost. Ben Ogilvie is with us as well. Ben, tell us where you're from.
I'm currently in Connecticut, and I'm with ArcTouch. We do native app development for lots of different companies.
Okay, now you're going to have to really explain this to me like a 5-year-old. We're going to need AI in here, so I know what you guys are talking about, because you two are smart people when it comes to this stuff.
And we're not, so dumb it down.
And he really isn't.
No.
But here's the thing. I want to pick up on a story that's come out from Anthropic, from the CEO of Anthropic, who's been talking about coding. And this is interesting because, of course, we know that AI is capable of lots of cool things, summarizing an email being one of them, but also being able to code, create apps, create websites. I mean, I remember seeing the picture. Remember that one of the guy who drew a website on a piece of paper?
Yes.
Snapped the picture and it built the website.
Yeah.
And you think, oh my God, we're all doomed. And I knew friends who had worked in website businesses and they had lost their businesses because of that, because people say, well, I can just do this myself. That's the sort of top of it. That's really the very tip of the iceberg, isn't it, Joe, of where we're at. And the Anthropic CEO has been saying this is only going to become more. It's going to get worse. That's a strong word, perhaps.
But we don't know yet.
Yeah, we don't know.
Yeah, I started to see a bunch of people on social media talking about this, that he said, they quoted that 2 to 3 months, 90% of code will be AI, and in 12 months, 100% of code. So using the AI tools that are available, I use something called Mac Whisper, and you just put in the URL of the video, it downloads the video, does a full transcription, and then using AI, you say, summarize this for me, and did he really say this? And it wasn't perfect. What they're saying on social media, as usual, was a little bit hyped. It's not 2 to 3 months, it's 3 to 6 months.
Oh, much better.
Okay.
Yeah. And in 12 months, he said 100% of code. We'll still need developers to oversee it a little bit on the design, a little on the security, but eventually it'll be 100% AI. And he said eventually all industries, essentially most human workers will be, all their work will be done better by AI. It is bone chilling.
This makes Elon Musk happy, right? Because he's ripping his way through American government as we speak, right? So that'll make him happy. That solves a lot of those issues. But this is a serious issue, isn't it? I say worse.
Civilization changing.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this a year ago, and I remember saying to you, Shaun, this is going to affect people's jobs. People are going to lose their jobs, and it's not going to be just the coders. It's going to be in all industries.
Well, it impacts everyone, doesn't it?
But you poo-pooed that suggestion, to use a technical term.
Yeah.
You poo-pooed that. You said no.
Well, I still see AI as a tool, but I've got to say the speed of which it's evolving is kind of scary.
Yeah.
And you used the term bone chilling.
Yes.
There to describe that.
Yeah, today I watched those little portions of the video, and it just because Dario is like, you listen to him speaking, he's very nice guy, very soft spoken. You can tell he cares, and just the way that he casually dropped those lines, you believe it, and I believe it because I've been coding with AI. I'm working on this project with Eamon Mackerlane, who heads up accessibility at ServiceNow, to evaluate the different AIs for how well they code accessibly. And when we first talked about this, I looked to build a team to do this with AI researchers, and the budget was way too high. But then one day I just kept coding with AI, and it got so good that I was like, you know what? What if I tried to write the code myself? even without all the expertise of the hardcore AI researchers.
So hang on, did you just fire 3 people that don't exist?
Yeah.
Wow.
I did. Exactly. And then while I'm working on it, every single day, it gets better and better. Things are changing on a daily basis. It is astounding. And so I'd say it was the combination of seeing this happen and having him say that as he just released a new agentic model. So when we're talking about AI agents, they are essentially going out and figuring out what tasks to do and doing more of them autonomously. And that's the scary part because they're getting so good.
I mean, Ben, from your point of view, is this hype? I mean, is it a reality that's coming down the line? 12 months, 100% of code is done by computers?
I will say, admittedly, Joe's closer to the bleeding edge than I am. We are still, to a degree, using AI as a tool within the creative process. Our company is using it for coding and for catching things in design that can help identify accessibility issues at the early stages of development. One of our sister companies is using AI for incorporating audio description into the creative process for advertising and marketing campaigns, things like that, to kind of get from the 1%-ish of content that's described to more brands incorporating that by default. So for me, we still are leveraging it to Shaun's point as a tool, but I do see the kind of continued acceleration to the kind of point of infinity that Joe has identified. And I think as with anything, there's a degree to which the sky may be falling, but there's still shelters.
Why?
I can't think of any other apocalyptic terms we're going to use
That's
today.
the most
But
positive spin we could take it.
there's a shelter whilst the sky falls.
And I actually attended at South by Southwest this weekend. I attended a talk by a futurist who took a historical perspective on kind of rapid accelerant changes in society. And he had this analogy of you've got the hyper-specialization, which is currently being refined and iterated on by agentic models. And then you've got the kind of dot connectors who go more horizontally than in depth. And he had a graphic that was a series of ladders that kind of, you've got one specialization at one base, another specialization at another base, and then at the top you've got the connection of those where something new is born. And he kind of zoomed out where there was this kind of fractal pattern of ladders over history of those dot connections breeding new industries and new specializations that didn't exist before. And he related it to a rising waterline where people who are below the waterline get left behind and people who figure out how to float get elevated to the next level. And it was a really great talk that kind of gave a different perspective, which is not all doom and gloom, but was speaking to the opportunities that get born out of these periods of massive societal shift. Looking back, he said, 3,000 years ago, we were here. 300 years ago, we were here. 30 years ago, we were here. And 3 years ago, we were here, and looked at the kind of development of those things on orders of magnitude. And said, this is an opportunity to be a dot connector rather than hyper-specialized, because it's those people who connect the dots across different, disparate industries and disciplines that float.
But that's going to be the few, not the many, isn't it? That's the problem. This is where there are more people left underwater on that analogy than there are left
to his
in the
point.
shelter.
To his point, in fact, what ends up happening ultimately, the negative perspective is that people float, in reality, what ends up happening is new industries get created that allow others to come up and reskill and retrain. And the jobs that were here 3 years ago might not be here a few years from now, but that allows that workforce opportunities to do things that that didn't exist before, and it creates new kinds of jobs that didn't exist before. And then it's not necessarily that people sink; it's that they get to rise with that waterline to do new things.
I suppose, in your point of view, though, Joe, it kind of is a little bit like that, because you, when we were talking before about this, you said, "Well, I haven't coded for a long time."
10 years.
Yeah, and then you decided, "Hey, I'll just jump back in and try it," and boom, off you go.
Yeah, look, every new technology has created new jobs, and it's created more jobs than it took away. But does that mean it just feels different this time? I'm not a Luddite whatsoever. I've always been very optimistic about these things, though, when we saw what happened with the web, you can't be naive anymore after going through the web. But it just feels different. It just feels different. I think about doctors. I have a friend who's a doctor. Already with an LLM, you can go in and ask ChatGPT any question you want, spend as much time as you want. When you're going to have the real dividing line where it's going to be a big problem is when the robot is good enough that it's, acts like a human, walks around like a human being, and then has all these LLMs with the latest information, and it has sensors on it. So now, instead of you going into a doctor who'll give you 10 minutes, you actually have a robot in your home that may have all these sensors that will detect on a proactive basis health aspects of your body. What do you need the doctor for? And then, I feel like there's a fork in the road where either there's just going to be a few companies, AI companies, that own robots that are in every single one of our homes, and they will be your doctor. The doctor gets no money anymore, as opposed to an economy where a doctor may own either 10 robots or pieces of that software, or somehow oversees the program locally, right? So that there's still businesses left. That's my fear. And, I do want to say we could be completely wrong. There might be a whole bunch of new jobs created, but being at the forefront of this, it just feels different. And I'm really worried, and pretty much everybody that's in this, or most people I would say, are worried about what this looks like in the coming years.
So interesting, you're saying a lot of people that are worried, that work in the industry. Is there no way to put the genie back in the bottle then? If people are so concerned with this, is there any chance that we say, okay, let's put a brake on?
I just don't think that's going to happen.
No, me either.
Yeah, yeah, and there's a lot of good that's going to come out of it. But what is the meaning of being a human when you have a machine that can do everything you do better?
Well, if it does it better, though, in your example of a doctor, I mean, if the end result is that you get better service or better results, then surely that's a good thing overall. But then you've got a complete shift in how society works, basically.
Yeah, I was speaking with a friend who was pointing out that we all live better than the richest kings did, in history, and AI is just going to do more of that. So yes, maybe, everybody's rich in a way, right? Though I will argue that you have to pay your rent, you have to pay your mortgage, and that is expensive. And a lot of people cannot afford it. I don't know that AI solves that, especially if it's just going to be a few companies that own all of the economy. It's going to be nasty.
Well, this raises the conversation of universal basic income and the potential there. Yeah. There has to be something. The problem is when you're involving governments in that kind of thing, everything slows down again. And I want to pick up on that because I know that it looks terrifying, and I can understand where you get that from. I imagine you're at the front of the train and we're all at the back of the train and kind of thinking everything seems okay, or at least it feels like we're a little bit a way off, but you're seeing this destination coming closer and closer and faster. But there is a reality, right? I mean, the robots take time to be developed. They take time to be normalized into society. Maybe that will happen quicker. I think you'd both agree, right? That's going to happen quicker because we're kind of being programmed to to imagine life with these things. A lot of people are crying out for it. They want it. I mean, people, if someone says to me, you can have this thing and it'll clean your house and it'll empty the dishwasher and I'll take the dog for a walk. If it's $1,000 a month, I'm having it. Right? Because it's well, that makes my life a million times easier.
Oh yeah, my fiance does not like technology or AI or any of that stuff. And I said, well, if it's going to clean the bathrooms and do the dishes, would you be okay with it? Oh yeah. I'll take that for sure.
Yeah.
Right? And I will say that I have a friend who builds robots, who's built lots of robots for NASA and for an entertainment company, and he felt that it's years away. But then I start showing him like some of the AI robotics projects going on, and he's just blown away by it. So I don't know if it's a year. It's probably more than a year. It's probably 5 years, 10 years.
I'd love to understand what's the year part, because I think when I think about the robot, we think about the mechanics of that. The brain seems to be growing faster than the body. Would you agree with that?
The brain you're talking about the brain of the robot?
The robot, yeah.
Oh, yeah, the brain is
because we've got this amazing brain, but it just doesn't have a body yet.
Well, it's interesting. So Jan LeCun from Facebook talks about the data. And we think that the data of the entire internet is massive, but I think he was saying either a cat or a baby, maybe it was a cat, like has more data. It has gone through more in a year or a couple of years than all of the LLMs are training with all of the internet. You have a lot of this visual data. And so as they start to gather this visual data, that really changes the game. And so the question is, when you've got a robot that's got this so much more data to train on, is it going to be able to build in that dexterity quicker? Is there going to be like a massive change overnight that we weren't ready for, just like ChatGPT seemed to appear out of nowhere?
That's how it felt for me, yeah.
Right? So is that going to happen with robotics? Is there going to be that moment? And things are just changing so quickly that it may. And that is the moment, I think, where I call it crossing the Rubicon, these Rubicon moments where AI, gets close to and then better than human at a task. You cross the Rubicon and you can't come back from there. And when the robot and the AI converge, all bets are off.
And we're going to see this in military, aren't we? This is where it's going to begin. I mean, it probably already is, let's be honest. We won't know about it. But, this is often where this technology is perfected first. Yeah. We're in a very precarious position in the world at the moment. We are in Europe, so we know only too well the threats that sit amongst us. And, there is a reality that these devices will be heading the next war. Suddenly we'll be living inside some dystopian nightmare. And if you live in Britain, you already do. That's a joke, of course.
Haven't Google already?
I'd lighten the mood.
Yeah, well done. Haven't Google already rolled back on their promise not to use AI in any weapons? I think I read that.
I think so. I mean, they I believe they did maybe a couple of years ago, something like that. Yeah, they were not going to do any of that, and then they eventually changed.
And once you see the Boston Dynamics, when they sort of started putting their videos out of the, was it Spot the dog robot and the Atlas as well, it was, it just blew everyone's mind, because it does seem like robotics has been stuck for a long time, and it has been just waiting for AI. And like you say, when the two meet, it's going to be a complete change.
Yeah, absolutely. And being Canadian, I loved seeing the hockey. Hockey and anything is good for a Canadian, So when they're using the hockey sticks, but I love those videos where they made I forgot what it's called. It was Boss Town Dynamics. Have you seen those videos? They essentially do a spoof on it where like the robots get upset about all of that, knocking them over and stuff like that, and so then they come back with guns and they shoot the people that built them, that kind of thing.
God help us all. It just seems like everyone's either underwater or dead. Bodies.
I hope we're inspiring your audience today.
I know. It's like I'm trying to find the positive, and I guess the positive is accessibility. Right? I mean, this is an area where we can really see growth towards a more, even at the base level, a more accessible internet, if nothing else. It goes way beyond that, of course, because AI seeps into everything. What's your perspective from where you are on this?
Yeah. So, we think about where things are headed, but we also have to be realistic about where things are now. And, kind of taking a step back from the futurist gloom and doom. Yeah. We do see the need for leveraging AI to make things more accessible at scale, because the way that things have been done for 30, 40 years in web development and, in the last 15 years in app development, which is where we specialize, there's a massive chasm between what gets built accessibly and what doesn't. We've got an industry report that we've been working on for the last 5 or 6 months that actually took inspiration from Joe a number of years ago when he came out with a state of accessibility report through his company at Diamond. They looked at web, and then and at the same time, the WebAIM team came out with their WebAIM Million report around the same time, yeah. I think, same year maybe.
Well, we started with a similar idea, but they had already come out with a web report, and so in the beginning, we're still trying to figure out what was really needed. So we did actually partnered with them with the good open source ethos, not to view it as competition, accessibility. We're all trying to make things better. And then it was actually Jennison that pointed out that there is no report on mobile apps. So
Jennison Assumption, of course, the other name that many will know, connected with creating global accessibility.
So he said, that we should do a mobile report. So we did a mobile report, and then COVID came around, and that took out a lot of companies, including mine. So then Ben and I connected up, and he said, why don't I keep going? Like we talked about it together. Why don't I keep that tradition going of a mobile report? So really happy that they came out with it.
Yeah, and we've taken a look. We can't assess 1 million apps like WebAIM has, because there's not great automation yet for testing accessibility on native apps. There's a handful of folks out there working on it, but it's not at the scale that you can kind of crawl 1 million apps like you can websites. So we've done manual testing. We've looked at, for this first version of the report, 5 different industries, the top 50 apps on iOS and Android, manually testing those against 4 different assistive technology configurations for screen reader on iOS and Android, alternative navigation with voice control, font scaling and orientation support. So, and we looked at what are the core user journeys in each of those industries. Why would somebody want to use an app in this industry? What's the reason for it to exist? And across those user journeys, those 200 user journeys that we tested across the different techs, we found that 72% of those user journeys produced a poor or failing experience for assistive technology users. And that, if you kind of look at that against the WebAIM report, which says 96% of the web, roughly, or the top 1 million web pages are inaccessible, there's clearly a lot of work to do. And yes, we do need to continue to talk about how we bring disabled users to the table and bring specialists in the product development lifecycle. But there's clearly a large percentage that hasn't been covered by those processes and those techniques alone. We've got to leverage AI in the ways that make sense while we all still have work to do.
And jobs.
And jobs, right. Yeah. To find ways to close that gap by making it easier to build things accessibly by default than to build it inaccessibly.
But couldn't AI in some way help you get that to scale?
That's exactly the idea.
You summarize all this disability experience, you take all this user experience, you create that as a data set essentially, and use that to figure out what on earth is going on with these websites or apps or whatever it might be.
Ideally, yeah. And that's, I'm thrilled that Be My Eyes and Microsoft have teamed up to bring a large group of disabled users to the table in helping provide feedback on the models that they're training, that a lot of teams are leveraging those models or other similar models in things like Cursor and other coding environments, in design systems, to try to get that feedback so the data itself is trained inclusive of disabled user experiences so that it can provide better or more accessible outcomes than what we've got to date.
Absolutely. Well, that's that. As you said, that is the danger, and that's why that's so important that Microsoft and Beam Eyes are sharing that data from us as disabled users, because otherwise, AI is just learning from the mistakes, as you just mentioned. The vast majority of software services or whatever it may be are inaccessible in some sense, and that's just learned by AI. Or the danger is it could be learned by AI and just reproduced again.
That's right.
Yeah.
But I mean, in your work, Joe, and personally, I guess as well, playing with Cursor, you've been seeing how these models are, because that was the question I asked you at the time, right? How, if I go to one of these models and say I want to build an app, just a very simple app about whatever it might be, how do I know that's going to be an accessible app? Does it know? Does it reference the WCAG guidelines and all that? Does it know what to put in there to make the app accessible? Label the buttons, etc.
So lately, I've noticed it get a little bit better than when you first had those models, but it's certainly not going to be accessible like if you don't pay attention to it. So it's really important. There's something called a system prompt, which is a prompt that goes with every single request you give it, where you give it certain guidelines. And so if you prompt it with, make sure that you follow the WCAG guidelines, make sure that everything is accessible, and you really direct it, then you have a much better chance, but you still have to test it, and you have to test it with people with disabilities. Otherwise, it's certainly not going to get there. And one of the reasons that, along with Eamon, we're doing those evals, is in order to be able to say, hey, these models are not building things accessibly, like be able to, first of all, evaluate which one is best, but our goal is to create benchmarks and eventually have the foundational models, the big companies, feel like they have to do well on these benchmarks and compete on the accessibility, and then we'll be somewhere. Because if we don't get that done, they will not compete on it, and we're going to have a more inaccessible world. So it's really, really important work, and nobody wants to fund that in an open source way. Everybody wants to sort of, if they're going to fund it, they want to own it, and when they own it, it isn't as useful. So I'm extremely grateful for Eamon and ServiceNow to put something forth that we're going to open source. I think it's really commendable.
Yeah, because the number of inaccessible apps is just going to go up and up and up, because everyone starts developing apps. It's more easier. The developer community becomes larger because essentially anyone can do it. So suddenly you have a ton of inaccessible apps dropping into the store, which doesn't help us. It doesn't help the disability community. I mean, in some ways, to bring us back to the beginning of this conversation where we started off and there was rising water and tides and bodies, actually, where we've kind of come to is, well, we still need people, right? We still do need people in the mix, because it may just be that the jobs change in the sense of they become more checkers of the code rather than the writers of the code.
Yeah, I mean,
am I pulling?
Well, here's the funny thing. Imagine that you have an amazing AI that can do 1 trillion different apps. They can build 1 trillion apps a month. Who's going to use those apps? At a certain point, the rubber meets the road at the user, and that volume has to be curated one way or another. And I think that's going to be sort of the tricky part of it. And what I suspect is going to happen is we're going to see, we've changed to a world where so much is virtual, but this kind of thing where people are meeting in person is going to be important when you can have a virtual human that you already can't tell. I've already, been getting videos where most people will be fooled, and then lately I'm fooled as well on some of the videos where it's 100% AI generated, right? So if you can create a virtual human being and the ARs are competing with each other for making the most interesting ones, the proof is going to be that you have a human being doing an in-person event. Now you know that you're dealing with a human, because we're not going to want to be consuming AI slop at the end of the day. We want to connect with other humans. So that's where I think it's going to go, in-person events. I think entertainment-wise, there's going to be a lot more sports and those kind of in-person in-person things. Like, I want to see Federer and Nadal and their human story. I don't want to see some AI version of Federer and Nadal playing tennis. Like, nobody will be interested in that.
See, I want to make a silly joke about that and say,
Yeah,
well,
I love jokes.
But actually, no. But I suppose, I think, in a serious level, I think there's a reality in this, that we are looking at this through our lens of our age, our experience. Younger people coming through who will see that, two robots fighting out in the tennis court or whatever it is, then that's what they're going to watch, and they'll get used to that in the same way that we thought growing up, well, television's a big thing in the corner that you watch. We all gather around it, we all sit and watch it. Why is everyone looking at tiny little rectangles now?
You might be right. I hope you're not right, but you might be right.
Could be generational.
Yeah, well, I guess what I'm saying is there's also a value in the how available something is. So if you have a volume of essentially unlimited trillions of AI, what's going to make you stand out is that you're a human. So there'll be an audience for it. There'll probably be an audience for both. Yeah. But I think there's going to be a huge audience for the humans. But I could be wrong.
Well, we're all going to have a lot more time.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's fun times.
Yeah.
It really is.
Is it? I don't know what to take away from this conversation.
I always love to be positive, so I did not mean to come into this with that sort of doom and gloom perspective. It's just literally, it came out of listening to him say that, and it was just really bone chilling.
Well, I mean, you think they'll talk in terms of years, but of course, and even that would be scary, but months.
Well, for coders, months. But you still need the coder. You still need that overview for sure, and deciding what to build, right? There's taste, and you still need the human for a while. But
we think we're fine. We think double tap's okay because we know they're programming artificial intelligence, not artificial stupidity. So we think we're fine. We think we're okay for now. So that's what we're living.
There you
go. Yeah, if a robot can do this, whatever this thing is that we do, then we're done. But so far, so good. No one can get...
Touch wood.
I mean, don't get me wrong, AI can do some pretty cool tangents, so maybe. Guys, thanks so much for coming on Talking AI with us. It's been really cool.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thanks for having
much.
us.
Thank you.